I'm Melisa Nielsen, and welcome to 2023.
Parenting and homeschooling can feel like a large feat to take on. Melisa Nielsen is here sharing her 26 years experience to help us. Melisa will inspire you with foundations for early childhood, Waldorf curriculum by the grade, middle school and high school resources, planning for peace, form drawing, beeswax modeling, wet-on-wet painting, inner work, temperaments, music, handwork, festivals, eurythmy, circle time, creating a co-op, homeschooling multiple children, conscious parenting, special needs, peaceful bedtime, and much more.
We're going to be doing our podcast in a two-piece format. So the first piece will be here on YouTube or on the podcast platform where you can listen to it for free. And the second piece, which is a deeper piece, a little more like going behind the scenes with Melisa a little bit. How do I actually apply these things in my life? And sometimes some juicier content. That is going to be available on our Patreon. Okay, welcome everybody to our podcast today. I am super excited. This is actually two parts that I have this lovely friend of mine with me. We're going to do early childhood and kindergarten, and then in a later podcast, we're going to do class 1. So I really am excited to introduce you to my good friend, Tiffany. She and I have known each other for a long time. Tiffany was a member of our Thinking, Feeling, Willing program way back when we had our Lifetime program. And then, you know, you've done so many things. So I'm actually going to let you talk about what you've done, where you've been, and sort of where you are now. But I also want to say she is over season 7. She is our early childhood, mistress. She's the lady of ceremonies over at early childhood. She also early childhood, kinder, and our class 1. So I want you to talk about where all have you been, my friend?
Well, thanks, Melisa, for having me today. I'm super excited to be here. And my journey is an interesting one, as most people's are, right, with Waldorf education. And yes, I was part of the Thinking, Feeling, Willing program about 12 years ago now. And it's just crazy to see, from that period of time to now, where this journey has brought me. I had my first son, and shortly after having him, you know, as we get those weekly emails as the child's developing in our,
Right.
in our room, we get what's growing, what's, developing, and they continue after they're born. And I got this one, he was a couple months old, and it was all about education. I was like, that's not even on my radar, right? And, Waldorf education was one of the options that was presented in this slideshow email. And I was like, that looks interesting. And at the time, I'm working 40, 50 hours a week as a financial planner, and I have a baby, and I'm trying to figure out life and parenting and all of the things. And so I, read further into the email, and I was like, I need to know more about Waldorf. And here I am. So
that's so amazing. That's so amazing. So that was your oldest is 12, right? So that's 12 years ago.
He's almost 12. So it's we're coming up on that 12-year mark, which is amazing.
And it's a big mark. We're doing that in our house too.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where those little glimpses of what is put in front of us in life, what we do with those, right? So now here I am, almost 12 years later, and I've gone through this journey of becoming a Waldorf teacher from that financial planner, right? And so I reevaluated everything once I discovered Waldorf, and you were a very first introduction to that. And I'm so thankful
that I was there for that, because I think too about our relationship over 12 years. Never would have thought that you would be where you are with us now. And
oh my goodness, no.
So beautiful.
Yes. So, anyway, here we are in the journey, and I'm developing it, and I do parent-child classes, and here's a full circle moment. So the first parent-child class that I did with my son, 4 years after that, I came back to work for the school, and it's a private Waldorf school in Arizona, and I developed a program for parent-child. That was a huge success there. And I worked in Waldorf kindergartens. I've taken my Lifeways fundamental training, which is an early childhood certificate. I worked at charter public Waldorf schools. I worked at private Waldorf schools. And now I'm a homeschooling mom, back again, full circle to what I thought it was in the beginning. And it's funny how life brings us back and brings us back. And then that led into the journey with Seasons of 7. And I just love it. It's so magical to see where life takes us.
I think so too. And we were sort of laughing the other day. You were like, first I was just doing the early childhood, and then I was doing early childhood in Kinder 1, and then I was doing early childhood in Kinder 2, and then I was doing early childhood and the Kinders and class 1. And It's such a beautiful space to have you in. It feels very right. You know, like what we didn't know when we started out Seasons of 7 that we can see now is it's just this beautiful space of you holding this early childhood space, not just for the children, actually more for the parents, right? And so that's really what I want to talk about today. We're, our podcast is 2 parts. So this first part, we're going to just sort of talk about this early childhood space. And then in our second part that is over on our Patreon, you can come and we'll have some deeper chats, some juicier chats, and about parenting and all of those places that we've been. So I think I want to start with this first question of like, what are the early years about? What do you, like in your words, having traversed them as a mother, as an educator, and as a student of Steiner, like what do you see for these early years?
So I think my reason and my goal for early childhood and these early years is to help the parents, as you said, because the parent is the beginning of all of this. It's the foundation, right? It's not the, aesthetic wooden toys and the silk and the pink classroom.
The cute stuff, right? The fluff.
It's not that, right? It's the foundation. And what is the foundation? So to me, the foundation, these early years, this 0 to 7 space, is kind of threefold. It's the rhythm, repetition, and reverence that we've heard all along with Waldorf education. So like, what does that mean? Well, our rhythm is the cornerstone of everything. And I know we'll talk about that, but it's everything. And working with parents to establish that rhythm, live in that rhythm, because it's always going to change and breathe. And that brings the goal of the 7 years that Steiner talks about is the goodness of the world, right? The world is good. And it starts with rhythm. It starts with repetition. How many times do our young children want us to read the same thing or sing the same song? That's because they live in that world of repetition and they get used to the ebbs and flows of our days, when to rest, when to eat, when we're going to have a family holiday, when we're going to have a rest day or a dad day or whatever it is. It's that that living rhythm and then the repetition. So they get comfortable. Then they don't have to worry about.
They want to know that's that comfortable place. Even as they're growing, like I even said this morning to my husband, Fridays is usually his day with them. And I could hear my daughter going, "What are we doing today?" And I was like, "You better go out there," because she needs to know in her mind, even though she's almost 12, she needs to know, because that rhythm and repetition makes them feel safe. If they don't have that, that's like almost trauma producing, because they don't know like where they can breathe out. And that's what rhythm does for us. It gives us that in breath, that out breath, and it allows us to like sort of breathe organically as we're walking through life, right? So it is so important to talk about. What was the other one? You said rhythm, repetition. What was the third one?
And so reverence. So that's like what we do in early childhood with the children, right? So much of what we teach them is through imitation. And that's a whole nother topic, but they learn through us. And so if we're bringing reverence to a mealtime or an activity, or if we're bringing reverence to a simple stone that they give us when they're standing outside and they're like, "Look, here's a gift for you." That is learned. That's a learned thing where so many things are already innate, but reverence really has to be learned and it has to be brought to them. So through, verses and a little simple song or a hand play before a meal, we're bringing that magic and that reverence. And that helps them to feel that love of family, the community, and the world, right? Like that's the world is good.
It is. And it's interesting because, I think that we often forget they're watching us constantly. They're, and I saw some reel the other day on Instagram, and it was like this mom who was like, I have a stalker. And then it showed her 3-year-old. I was laughing because it is like that. They're watching you constantly. They're doing the things that you do. They want to, they are in awe of you. I mean, for a couple of reasons. One, like they're so etherically tied, they're really still part of you when they're in that younger space. But also that that's how they're learning. That's how we learned. We didn't learn to ride a bike just by seeing a bike for the first time and getting on and doing it. We had to see somebody do it.
Right.
And then gain trust over the fact that we could do it because that other person did it. And so I think what's so important to me that I feel like I try to spend a lot of time working with families on is, if what we're doing isn't worthy of imitation, we have to like check ourselves. We have to ask, like, is this thing that they're watching me do something that I want them to do? Like, the parents that say to me, what do I do about my child swearing? And I go, I don't know. What are you going to do about your own swearing? Like, because
right.
It is, right? They're hearing us say it all the time.
Yes, exactly.
So like all of those things, all of those pieces are so important. And you're right. Reverence it's a learned space. They see our awe, like, wow, isn't this rock so neat? What are all the colors that we see in this rock? Or, oh, this flower that you brought me smells so pretty. Where instead, if we were like, leave that rock outside.
Yeah, right.
So,
different feeling.
I don't know about you, because I know you've got several children like I do. You're like, I don't think the nature table can handle another rock.
Yes. So
I had to be like, let's go put that in the rock basket. And we have to find ways to sort of keep that space alive and really allow them to see reverence through us. And that means we might have to learn reverence, because when parents ask me, how do I teach my child reverence? Again, I'm like back at, well, how are you at reverence?
Were you, showing that?
Right. And it's so big. It's so big. Talk to me about how important you think rhythm is in these years. I know people know why I think it's important, but I want to know why Miss Tiffany thinks it's important.
So our focus in the early years with early childhood is just what we mentioned, those 3 R's. It's developing the 4 lower senses, which is a whole nother thing. And it's developing our parenting, right? So what is our family culture? How are we going to parent? What are our values? Sleep, warmth, nutrition, and all of that is tied to rhythm. And rhythm is the cornerstone. It's the seed in which everything blooms from in early childhood. And, the very famous quote, right? Rhythm restores power. It brings us back. It cycles us back. It's this breathing thing. It's not do this at 8 o'clock and do this at 2 o'clock. It's the flow of the day. It gives us the opportunity to just say, that didn't work, or this is working great.
Right.
And it gives us the time to just, what are we focusing on early childhood? If it is, giving them a good sleep life, giving them warmth, giving them nutrition, building up these foundations, well, what do we need to have in our day? And what aren't we having? And if sleep is hard, how do we help support that? And it all goes back to rhythm.
That's so much. I love Steiner said, and I'll botch it, so I'm just going to paraphrase it. He said something about how rhythm is everywhere. It's all over in nature. It's apparent in nature. Humans are the only ones that have cast it off.
Yes.
It's in animals, it's in the tides, it's in the planets, it's in everything else. We're the only ones that are like, it's all right. I don't need rhythm. And it's even in our bodies, right? Yeah. Like it's our female bodies. Like every 28 days, something happens. Yes. So it's so interesting to me.
If he was saying that 100 years ago, like how different has it been for modern parents to just say like, away with all of that rhythm, right? The rhythm of the seasons, of like our family culture with festivals. It's even worse now. So if we go back and we really take power over rhythm and how we want our day to flow with our young children, then that gives us power. It gives us time to be a parent and see what's working and not. And then it's that safety for your child.
I agree. What would you say to a parent that's listening that's in this early childhood space, and maybe even beyond, because I think rhythm is like crazy important all the way through, not just childhood, but life. I sort of laugh. My adult children will come home to visit, and they'll see the rhythm chart that I have on the wall. And they're like, today is Tuesday and you should be doing this. Why is this not happening right now? And I'll be like, well, I didn't, no, Mom, we need to do that. So it's funny that it's ingrained in them, and they're still bringing some of that to their lives. But if there was a mom that came to you, or a dad that came to you in this early childhood space, and they said, where do I start? Maybe they've got an infant or a young toddler, because it looks very different in those years, because it is all based on eating, sleeping. So what would you say to that parent that was like, help, where do I start?
Well, I think you said it, eating and sleeping. What are you doing now? What is your rhythm now? Right. So just writing down, and you have talked about this over and over, writing down what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Just live your days as they're being lived.
Yep.
Write down what your rhythm is, and then put in important things, these little cornerstones of our rhythm of the day, like eating and sleeping, which is a big part of early childhood.
Right.
And then go from there. Start making these tweaks that are valuable to you and your child to get to the rhythm you're striving for, right? But start with those, when are we going to nap? When are we going to have snack? When are we going to eat a meal as a family? When do we want to start bedtime? And build upon that. And then add over time, as you get comfortable to that, what you're striving for.
I agree. And that is, I think it's such an important piece, because parents go, I don't have rhythm. And I think, no, you do, but you have to keep track of it. I talk about the actual rhythm chart, and sort of like looking at, it's great if you can look at 7 days, but usually I can only get somebody to look at 3 days. 3 days is better than no days though. So looking at those 3 days, okay, well, what did you do? Something was rhythmic there. Look at what you did in how you got up, and what you were eating, or how you were coming about that. And then I also say, like, look at behaviors. If you've got little ones that are tantruming constantly, why are they tantruming? Because what I see happen is that the tighter our rhythm and the more structured our day, because rhythm isn't really structure, it just provides flow to the day. But the more we govern that space, because it's not just free for all flow, it's a flow that we are like leading. Children tantrum less.
Yeah.
Their sleep is better. Our sleep is better.
Yes.
Magically, you get to make food, like, because you made a plan for it. All of those really little tweaks make such a huge difference in their lives. Their lives are still so tied to us, and tied to this other space that they came from. They're not really fully here yet. I think we spend so much time as adults trying to explain to children how to not be children.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's what we're preserving in the early childhood, is that gentleness, right? That we're creating that womb of life for the first 7 years, that extension of within us, that they don't need to just have exposure to everything and, academics or media or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
And that rhythm, just like inside of us when they're there, we're providing that in these early stages through what our day is.
No, totally agree. You touched on something there, and I want to talk about that thing that you touched on before we close up this segment. But you touched on like appropriateness. So what stories would you say would be appropriate for this age, and why would you say that?
Okay, so I have 3 answers for this.
I mean, I know 7 years is a big gap. So
yeah,
you got like a 0 to 3 answer probably, and a 4 to 6 answer. Go ahead.
Well, it really comes down to, us first and foremost, what we should be giving our children for stories is storytelling from us.
Right. From our mouths.
That's like so challenging for parents to be like, wait, what I need to tell a story orally to my child and not just read a book. Yes, we do. And it's that inner work. It's all of that. But just telling the child about their day as a different character, like a little mouse, he went to the grocery market. That's the beginning, right?
It's so totally the beginning.
Yes, stories from the parent about their life, their childhood. I have a cat and a dog that I grew up with that become like the cornerstone of our storytelling when I was like trying to figure it out, right? And what did Lilac and Koshi do growing up? And that was it. And then the second is appropriate fairy tales and nature tales, tying back to that rhythm of the year.
Right. Nature tales so important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so simple. I think we really try to overcomplicate it, even though we're trying not to. But and I think even because even myself, I'm about to be 50 and I have 5 children. I've been on this path for a long time. There are times where I'm like, Melisa, why are you making it so hard?
Yes.
I mean, but at least I catch myself, right? Like the longer we're at this, the more we go, oh wait, no, I shouldn't be doing that. But I think to this space of like finding it's again, it goes back to that awe and wonder in nature and in those nature stories. It doesn't have to be a big deal. I know often parents will say, I don't want my 5-year-old to think that fairies are real. And I go, why not? I think that fairies are real and I'm almost 50. And just because we don't know doesn't mean we have to say, no, there's not. So I think that we're not going to raise children that are bonkers. We are raising children that are excited about the world.
Yes.
Excited about the world. I might say, what do you think that lizard is thinking? Like that drives my almost 12-year-old. She's like, then she'll tell me, I think he's thinking about the government and about what's going on in Greece. And like, she'll go on, right? Because that's where she's at in her mind. But if you ask a 6-year-old, they might be like, I don't know. And and then the dog comes around and eats the lizard. And then the kids are like, wait, what just happened? And that gives you an opportunity for another story, another space of this awe and not needing to explain nature, but just sort of see nature, observe nature.
Yeah.
Make little stories up about the little ants crawling over there, or again, the lizard, because it's such a simple, beautiful space, and they really shouldn't have overly complicated stories at this age. Right. What fairy tales come to mind that would be appropriate? Because I know there's so many fairy tales, but there is a small subset of fairy tales that's probably pretty appropriate for these ages.
Yeah. So I love things like Sweet Porridge from Brothers Grimm. That was like one of my favorite ones. Right. There's some wonderful resources. Parents are always like, well, what do I do? Waldorf Publications came out with Tell Me a Story and Tell Me a Story Again. And then the Waldorf Early Childhood Association came out with Truer Than True, which is fairy tales from around the world. So those are like my go-to ones. Those are the ones that I love to bring. It's just beauty to the children. It's that goodness.
We'll make sure we have those titles in the resources too. So yeah. I'm making myself a note, Tiffany resources. Because I think that is, I think that's so important. I think that often parents are like, well, I don't know. I don't want to tell Hansel and Gretel to a 3-year-old. Nope, you don't. No. But that's like a one for a 7-year-old, but it's not, we have to sort of have some discernment on the stories and sort of where our child is at that time. And they really need like simple stories. That's why Sweet Porridge is such a good one, because it is such a very simple. It's not super deep. It's not crazy long.
Yeah. It's rhythmical. It brings it back and back, and there's not these obstacles and things that are going to meet an older child with the more simple and sweet stories that we want our younger early childhood students to experience, because there's a time and place for those, right? No, there's a time and place for those.
No, I agree. I think that those pieces are so important. And I think your parent listening, if you could take anything away from this, I would just say rhythm and pay attention to what they're consuming. They don't need all the laws of thermodynamics when they're 4. Just keep it like, oh, isn't the sunset pretty?
Yeah.
All of those spaces, because they are in that in that space of wonder, and let them follow you around. They are going to seem like little stalkers, but that's what they're supposed to do. That's their work.
That's their work.
That's their work. And, okay. I think we're going to close up this piece, and we're going to, but before we do, I want to say, one thing that's lovely about the work that you're doing with Seasons of Seven is that you take parents through this early childhood journey. So talk a little bit about that and sort of what you're doing with our parents over there, and how you're helping them to sort of structure their rhythm in their lives. Go ahead.
So, as I said, early childhood really starts with the parents, right? And so a lot of my work at Seasons of Seven is actually with the parents and not with the child. And so we just talked about how simple early childhood can be, but then how complicated it is with setting the foundation, with how do we build a rhythm? How do we understand our parenting values? How do we bring these beautiful stories, all of what we just talked about. So my work with Seasons of Seven is to help you make that easier, right? I'll find the stories and I'll give you the ideas for painting. I'll bring articles and discussions about inner work and about how to, bring a storytelling to your child, which we talked about how important that was.
Right.
And that's my work, right? Is how do I support you to support your child in this space? How do you bring rhythm through your week with beautiful activities? All that Waldorfness that so many people are attracted to, but then it becomes so complicated. And I want to just give the parents the information, be that support. We create a community with our classes, with the parents coming too, so that they have a sounding board of other parents doing this work.
No, it's really beautiful. It is just like a parent taught class in a Waldorf school. It's about the parent, and the child is coming on along with you. It's not called child and parent. It's called parent and child, parent and taught. So you're bringing the child along with you in that space, and that really is a beautiful space. And I know our families love you, and we get so many like accolades about Tiffany. Oh, how much they love you, because you're magical. To watch one of your puppet plays you're, even as an adult, I'm like, just watch, and just because it is such a beautiful space. It really transforms you into that place. And I think it's so beautiful that you are working with parents to bring that to their homes. So I love that so much. So now we're going to sort of take 2 seconds here, breathe. And now we're going to talk to our Patreon people. Find our Patreon at Ariel's Light. So Ariel's Light, if you haven't heard already, is the ministry that we started this year. Interfaith, so we welcome people of all faiths to come and experience and converse and really get to know this conscious parenting space. I see it as a space for people that might be deeply into their religion, like being able to go deeper in what that parent-child relationship means. And then people that are just trying to figure out, like, what does this inner work journey mean to me? In that space, and I've been there trying to figure out, well, how do I bring what's welling up inside me to my children so that they aren't lost in confusion, so that they actually have this piece of goodness and beauty that Steiner always talks about. So the ministry has roots of anthroposophy, and we will be talking about things from an anthroposophical standpoint, but also really bringing you good content that you can bring into your life right now.